Oh, okay.
We are live now.
Okay, thank you. It is now 3 p.m. We will call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. If we could please have a roll call.
Freeman.
Aye.
Samovian.
Aye. Couldn't get the mute up.
Wallen.
Aye.
Taylor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
Very good. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the previous week's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, very good. We have nothing on the old agenda, I do not believe. We do have, however, a few items this week, and I'll begin with item number 2. This is an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of not to exceed $1,025,048.50 of bonds to pay in anticipation of the collection of special assessments heretofore levied, the property owner's portion of the cost of improving certain streets in the city of Akron, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our annual issuance for the property owner's portion of our resurfacing program. So this is the bond that we're issuing for the 2020 resurfacing program. It will be paid back with the assessments that are certified to the county that we collect every year over the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Linda.
Yes, Ms. Mobian?
Mr. Fricker,
Yes.
now these funds will be paid back within a year, or we only borrow them for a year? How
No,
does that work?
so we typically what happens is the people that had assessments for resurfacing that was done in front of their property, they have the choice of either paying cash or choose to then have that certified, not paid in cash, and have it certified on their property tax bill. So the people that chose that route of having it certified on their taxes, we issue the bonds to pay ourselves back, and then we'll pay the debt service on these bonds over the next 5 years as they pay those assessments. So it's paid back over a 5-year period is, I think, the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Fricker, what would be your pleasure here?
Consent agenda is fine.
Motion for consent.
Second.
A motion, second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 All right, thank you. Second item is an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of notes, the city in the maximum principal amount of $5 million to retire the city's $5 million taxable economic development revenue note, Series 2020, the AES System Improvement Projects, previously issued under Section 13 of Article 8 of the Constitution of the State of Ohio and Chapter 165 of the Ohio Revised Code, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last year we issued a $5 million note to do some improvements to the steam system and for other energy projects. Some of them involved some HVAC work that we did on the Canal Park Stadium. So that note matures this year. We don't want to take that to long-term financing right now. We want to roll this note one other year because we may at some point add some additional new money to do some other projects throughout the course of the next year. We also potentially have, as most of you are aware, there's potentially some infrastructure money coming in that some of these steam system improvement projects might be eligible for some of that funding. So we just want to roll this note over for one more year and then potentially take that to long-term financing next year.
Very good. Questions or comments? I do not
Mr.
see your hand.
Chair.
Please speak. Yes, Ms. Mobian?
Linda Mobian. Mr. Fricker, now the steam plant itself is self-sufficient, right? It's self-financing. I know
It
they
is,
told
so it
us
is
we
covering its
visited
operating cost.
there and
Yes, yes. So it is covering its operating costs. We still have to fund, and it's covering some of the debt service for the system improvements that we've done. We still have to cover some of that. But as these improvements are coming online, they are generating more and more revenue and reducing our costs. So they're able to absorb more and more of the annual debt service that we pay, as we're making these improvements. So that's been kind of the goal of doing a lot of these improvements, is it does improve the efficiency of the plant and allows more of the revenue that comes in to be applied towards the debt service that we have.
okay. I think that answers my question. We don't have any, other than this, we don't have much long-term financial investment or support that we have to give this steam plant.
No, I mean, as I said, they are covering their operating costs, and they are covering a good portion of the debt that we've issued over the past, 10 to 15 years for system improvements.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That was a real success story too. That was
Yes.
something that some of us wondered if that would ever happen, and now it's happened. That's
Right. Yeah. So they made some very wise investments in the operation of the plant. Through these investments, we've got new boilers. They're more efficient. Whole new control facility. So those improvements are reducing their costs quite a bit.
So
You have
if
questions?
people haven't been there, they want to go visit because they gave us the visit last year, and they modernized a lot of things, and the place looks much, much better.
Yeah, absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Would we consent all right on this as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion for consent.
Second.
All in favor of consent, let it be known by saying aye.
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 All right. Thank you. And item number 4, Sarah, did we have a change here? Item number 4.
Yes, an updated one was sent.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and read that in for me?
An ordinance amending and or supplementing Title 3, Chapter 34, Public Contracts and Property, Section 34.09, Public Contracts Bond Requirements of the Akron Codified Ordinances in order to remove the requirement of a performance bond for certain types of contracts and declaring an emergency.
All right, Mr. Fricker.
Ms. Goodrich is going to handle this one.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Chuck.
So the piece before you is something that we have realized that we need to fix in our code. It's to address some of the inequities that we have seen that impact our small minority businesses that we started to strategically approach getting contracts to these businesses. Just a little background for you all. Currently, the City of Akron ordinance requires a performance bond for certain contracts over $50,000. That bond will range from anywhere between 10% for certain commodities up to 100% of the contract value. A performance bond is issued to us as a guarantee against the failure of the other party to meet the obligations of the contract. However, our contractors have to pay bond premiums for these performance bonds, and they typically range from 0.5% to 2% of the contract amount or higher in cases of high-risk businesses, and depending on the size, duration of the project and the contract. A bid bond, which is also in this legislation, is a guarantee that a bidder will hold their price essentially for the City of Akron and honor the terms of their bid. If not, the city will be compensated. What we're finding is that for some of our smaller contracts, these performance bonds and bid bonds are making it difficult for contractors to accurately bid. A lot of times when they're bidding the project, they don't know what their premiums are going to be for the performance or the bid bond. And some of these projects are just projects that we don't need a performance or a bid bond on. If the contractor is not adequately performing, we will cancel the contract with the vendor after we work to try to make things right, and we will just go to the next lowest bidder. So we're adding a burden onto these businesses by having to get these performance bonds and bid bonds. So we want to increase the flexibility of allowing the service director and engineering and the purchasing agent to kind of set the performance and the bid bonds based on the project. I have Sheena on here with me. She can go ahead and give you guys a little bit of the background of what she's seen in her time at the city of Akron as we've tried to increase our contracting with our minority and small businesses and kind of the challenges that they've faced in getting these performance and bid bonds. So Sheena, why don't you go ahead and speak to that?
Sure. So some of the issues that our minority contractors are facing when approached with bonding is that if they have not paid their child support, that is a big barrier for a lot of our small businesses. Also, if they have a low credit score, also if they have a DUI, those seem to be a lot of the barriers that we've had so far.
So happy to take any questions that you guys have about this change, but it will allow us to evaluate on a project by project basis to set the performance and the bid bond so that we're making sure that we're not excluding certain businesses.
Shelley, I'll start out here. It sounds scary to me not to have somebody, have to have some kind of performance bond. I'm not sure what the criteria is going to be about, okay, you need a performance bond for this job, you don't for this job. And I want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves at risk. So maybe you could.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So our law department was involved in drafting this language. Obviously, we don't want to put the city at risk either. I can tell you we've never in the history of many years, as far as we can all remember, called a performance or a bid bond. It is something to protect us, but most of the time we are able to work with contractors to resolve any issues. And if they're not adequately performing up to the standards of the contract, then we simply will terminate the contract and move to the next lowest bidder. There will still be performance bonds required for construction contracts that are over $100,000. So this is really just for those smaller contracts that what we're seeing is, example, the mowing contracts. We require a performance bond for those, and it's really making it difficult for our minority contractors to pay the bond premiums monthly. And if they're not mowing the lawns, we're gonna talk to them and see what's going on and try and make it right. And if this isn't a contract that's good for the city or good for the contractor, then we're gonna cancel the contract and go our separate ways. We're not going to call the performance bond because that's ultimately going to harm the contractor as well. So definitely agree. But the law department's been involved in the drafting of this language, and this will be used sparingly as we look to increase minority and small business participation, on our contracts at the city of Akron.
Okay, so lack of a performance bond, how is liability assigned then if a contractor, the blade flies off the lawnmower?
Mm-hmm.
I can
Help me
take
understand that.
Yeah.
David Honig from the law department. I think most of you know me. A performance bond essentially ensures performance. So, and it protects the city from a lack of performance. So in many instances, the projects where we're talking about doing this, the low dollar, smaller projects, they're basically done with the work before we'd have to pay them anyway. So in those type situations, we would have the contract balance of, if it's a $30,000 project, which is what the performance bond would be anyway. Because of the way these are done, you start and you're completed often, they're 30-day scopes and quick turnaround. So we would do that. The things where like a blade flies off the lawnmower, that would be covered by insurance. We're not waiving any of the insurance requirements. They still need to have the insurance to cover that sort of thing. The performance bond essentially just covers the city if a contractor fails to complete. It allows us, if the next contractor is $5,000 more expensive, to recoup that $5,000 or whatever that would be. So,
okay, thank that. And I should have known, but that answers my question. So we're not waiving any any liability. We're not waiving, there's liability still on the contractor. This is strictly performance.
Yes, and even if we don't have a bond, we could still have the contractual remedies for their lack of performance. It doesn't waive any liability. The bond is just an extra measure, but given the type of projects these would be, they're generally done within a time frame before we'd have to make the first payment anyway. A lot of these projects are, 30 days, and we don't pay that quickly on.
And it's just an added cost on the contractor that we're seeing is a barrier for participation, in our process, in our competitive bidding process. So like I said, it would be evaluated on a case by case basis with the law department to decide, when we feel that a performance and or a bid bond is not required, and when we think it should be required, and what the level should be for the contractors.
Okay, and whether or not a performance bond is needed or not, that would be stated in the RFP when it went out?
Correct. Yep. But what we're seeing is we're requiring it for like most, for all competitive sealed bids right now. And it is a barrier for some in participating in the competitive bidding process. So we want to be able, especially where we know that there's a good small minority business market, and we're willing to, essentially just rely on our contract remedies that, if performance doesn't complete, we may have a little bit additional cost going to the next lowest bidder, but we're making these small contractors shoulder that burden. And, so they're not wanting to contract with us. It's an additional cost. It is creating a barrier to entry with the city of Akron.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for those responses. Looking for any other questions, and I see Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much, Ms. Goodrich, for the presentation. I really applaud the continued work that you and Ms. Fain and Mr. Honig, and I know many other people are doing to improve the minority access to city contracting. It's a huge amount of money. And I think we really can advance equity in that regard. I think the thing you answered my question that I was going to ask, similar to Mr. Freeman's question, is that we've never called in one of these bonds. And so it's in effect, it has not been a tool that has been used. We've just had it lying around, and it's caused, it's been an obstacle for others, but it hasn't been a benefit to us. So what's the point? So that answers any concerns that I have, and really, looking forward to having this in place.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments
This is
or questions? Yes, Ms.
Mr.
Amobian?
Thank you. As I indicated earlier, Shelley, and the rest of the team, for the work you're doing. I realize we're looking at some practices and the things that were in contract and make things legal. Some things can be removed, and I think you made it perfectly clear. Without the performance bond, if they're not performing, you'll just pull the contract, and I'm sure the contract will spell out exactly what's expected for them to do. And if they don't live up to it, you can give it to the next person. So I think that gives me enough satisfaction and what you're trying to do. So appreciate the work. And again, we'll continue to make some progress, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say, this is just, I can't, Sheena is doing fantastic out in the community. And this is something that we've heard over the last couple of months that, it's a challenge. And so I think as we continue on this journey, we need to continually look at our city ordinances and see what the barriers are that can potentially impede businesses from interacting with the city of Akron. And unfortunately, this was one of them. So this gives us more flexibility to set the performance and bid bonds, or to not have them if it just makes sense not to have them for these low dollar contracts.
I don't mean to ignore you, just that I'm still learning your name, but thank you for your work as well.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Out, Sarah, am I missing anyone?
I do not see any hands raised right now.
So, Steve, would consent be okay on this, or do we need this passed right now?
I think
Consent would be, yeah, consent's fine.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Shelley.
Mhm.
Sorry about that, Steve.
Oh, you're
no,
fine.
no problem.
Motion for
Shelley, you don't
consent.
look anything like Steve. So I apologize.
I'm better looking.
All right. We have a motion for consent.
Second.
Linda did second. Me.
Okay, I have a motion and a
Either
second.
or.
All in favor of placing this item on the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 If there are any opposed, a like sign, and we will see that this item is placed on the consent agenda. And next, we have an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to expend after-school program grants for the 2021-2022 school year administered by the State of Ohio Department of Education, authorizing the Director of Finance to enter into a contract with Akron Public Schools for programming services for the Akron after-school program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our 21st century grant that we've had for a number of years. We have Cindy Donnell, who is our audit and budget manager. This grant is kind of administered by the finance department. So Cindy can speak on the particulars of this grant. As I said, this is something that we've been doing for a number of years now.
Thank you, Ms. Donnell.
So we were awarded a renewal of the existing grant we had. So for this school year, they're giving us an additional $150,000 to expend. And then we had a carryover from the prior year. Due to COVID, this is the first time we've ever had a carryover on any of the 21st century grants. But with COVID, they just did not have the after school programming. So we're carrying over just over 21,000. So we're asking council to authorize the expenditure of the carryover grant as well as the new grant.
Very good. Yeah, we'll probably never see a carryover again, will we?
Yeah.
Okay, questions, comments? Looking for any raised hands?
Not sure if you can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Yes, Mr. Malik, sorry about that.
Hi there. Thank you, Ms. Donnell. The amount, 150,000, is that the same as last year? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Last year, we received $200,000. Typically, the way they structure their grant awards, we get like 200,000 for year 1, 2, and 3. And then years 4 and 5, they usually drop it down. So to get 150,000 on year 4 of the grant is in par with other years. Next year, if we get the renewal for the 5th and final year of this grant, we could get $100,000. It's just up to the state.
Okay, thank you. And then just follow up, what is APS's approach this year for after school? And, you know, is it going to be, you know, much more extensive than I assume last year there wasn't any, so.
They're structuring their programming in a manner similar to like any normal year. Now, if COVID changes that, you know, we may end up with a carryover again. It just depends on what happens and what the mandates are and what some of the guidance that comes out. But they're structuring it just as a normal school year, and hopefully they'll be able to continue.
Hopefully. And thank you for the answers, and thank you very much for your work in administering the grant.
Thank you.
All right, and then I'm just assuming APS, they're aware of, hey, we're coming to the close here of a 5-year cycle, and they know that for their budgeting purposes. Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, would this item consent be okay on this?
Consent is fine for this, yes.
Okay.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and several seconds here. And with that, we will ask for a vote. All in favor of placing this item on the consent agenda, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Excellent. Do we have anything else to come before us? I don't believe so.
That's it.
Okay, very good. Hey, thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you to Finance Department. Thank you to Shelley, Ms. Donnell, 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 Ms. D Cindy, and Mr. Fricker for all that you do. And we will adjourn here at 3:25 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is the final committee meeting for today. The council will meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.
Sarah, it's Phil. Sarah, you still on?
I'm here. Give me just 1 second. Start.
Okay. Hey, Linda,
Yeah,
I was just gonna ask Sarah, are we doing that 3:30 reimagining public safety, or was that the noon?
I think it's 3:30.
Well,
I
she
think
was
so.
okay. Well, she was saying,
Sorry
hi,
about
Sarah.
that. No, this was the final meeting for the day.
This is it. This is it.
Oh, we don't do the,